Hey, it's Carrie.
And Ashley.
We welcome you to the Self-Care Cafe. We are both health professionals and moms and nature lovers and food lovers and love helping women get over dieting and just start living. We think that talking about bodies and perfect bodies and dieting is just boring.
Did we put you to sleep there, Carrie?
Yes. So if you are ready to ditch dieting and get to living and talk about more important things, then you are in the right place. We don't put shame and guilt on the menu here. You don't even have to tip us.
Nope.
Come hang with us. The advice is free. We want to have a bunch of girlfriends to just hang out with and get real with, and it's time to start living, ladies.
Hey, Carrie.
Hey, Ashley. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm a little tired today. How about you?
Same. Sounds like you're more tired than me today, though.
That's okay.
We're switching.
Yeah. We're recording a little bit earlier in the day than we normally do also.
Yeah, Ashley's not a morning person.
No.
I made her do it today, though.
That's okay. That's all right. It got me up and moving, which is a good thing.
Yes. Well, what do we have on the menu today?
How about talking about, I think we mentioned it in one of our last episodes, and we said we were going to do an episode about it. So here we are. We're talking about the difference between people pleasing and serving others, because they sound so similar.
Yes. And I love this topic because by nature, I am a people pleaser. Well, I shouldn't say by nature. I think we're conditioned toward that, right? Well, we kind of sometimes, in some ways, we condition ourselves.
Yep.
We can also be sort of conditioned by other people. So today we're going to talk about what is the difference between people pleasing versus serving others. And we always say it's going to be a shorter one, but
you never know. Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like you said, sometimes it's the conditioning that we get from, like our society, our culture, but then also our own doing. And I think one of the last episodes we talked about how we feel like we have to do it all. And that's a big part of it too. Like we have to say yes to everything or else we're not being good enough humans or citizens of our community.
Yeah, and I think too that depending on, I like to talk a lot about limiting beliefs, to like what what's our belief system, and we've got more positive beliefs, but then we also have those limiting beliefs that limit us. And so if you struggle, for instance, with a belief that I'm not going to be loved and accepted by this person or by this group unless I do XYZ, then you're going to always find yourself doing XYZ. So some of the underlying foundation reasons or whatever for people pleasing is sort of this wanting to belong, wanting to be loved, to feel safe. And so there's it's also fear-based, right? But in a lot of ways it's also self-serving because we want to feel those things. That's where that difference comes in, self-serving versus serving others. So for me, I did for years I had fallen into that, that we all have that want and that need, right, to be loved and accepted and belong and to feel safe. And so when whether we're conditioned by our circumstances and then we carry that with us, right, because then that becomes a habit that we do, basically, of people pleasing other people. And like Ashley mentioned, it's sometimes we need to say no. We get so conditioned to say yes, I'll do that. And then what happens?
Yeah, then we're burnt out and overwhelmed and stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And so before we get too far in our chatting, what is the difference, Carrie, between people pleasing and serving others?
when you are people pleasing, it is more self-serving. It also is more coming from a place of kind of control, right? So you're kind of trying to control the circumstances. It doesn't feel great. Like Ashley mentioned, the overwhelm and resentment. Like resentment also builds up, right? Because it's
Yeah,
like, okay, yeah, let me also back up, like there is some overlap. Like a lot of us who people please, also many times we do get filled up by serving others, but knowing the difference uh, between those things, when you are people pleasing, you just get depleted, right? It
right.
depletes your bucket. When you serve others, when you're truly serving others from a heart of service, it feels good. You want to do it. You don't do it because you feel like you have to or out of some duty to do it, right? It's because you want to. It fills you up. It lights you up. You get excited about it. It feels good. And it fills your bucket versus people pleasing depletes it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I think maybe we can give some examples to explain a little bit better about what we're talking about and the difference. So something that was coming to my mind was like with the people pleasing, thinking about saying yes to everything,
Mhm.
like kids' school bake sales and kids' activities and going out with friends and all of it. Every time someone asks you to do something, you say yes. Like Carrie said, maybe out of duty or like the responsibility or obligation. Um, Instead, we could think of it as like, "Ooh, I really like baking. That's something I'm good at, and I really like participating in the kids' bake sale." So being able to take that step back and reflect before you make your choice instead of just like autopiloting, saying yes to everything.
Yeah, and I think too that we are afraid of maybe offending people.
Mm,
So we don't want to offend people. We don't want to, a lot of people pleasers have that avoidant kind of personality because we avoid conflict. We just want to make everybody happy.
yeah. And one other thing too, like with your kids' school stuff,
Mhm.
um, I feel like sometimes we also have mom guilt if we say no to anything to
Oh,
do with our kids
mom
in the
guilt.
school. And
Yeah,
it's like, well, they're gonna think I'm a bad mom, or they're gonna think I don't care about my kid or the school. Like we spiral pretty fast in those pretty extreme thoughts.
mhm.
And
That's a great way of putting it. That spiral, that downward
yeah,
spiral.
but they probably asked a bunch of other people too. And it's just like if you say no, they're gonna move on to somebody else.
Right. And here's another way, here's a way to reframe it, which we're going to get to more, but since we're already on this topic, what if you always saying yes is taking away someone else's opportunity to participate,
Ooh, that's a great way to look
right?
at that.
What if someone else might, maybe for them it would be serving versus you're people pleasing because you're just afraid to say no.
Yeah,
And for them, they have the time or the talent or whatever, and you're taking that away from them.
right.
Uh,
And
right? That's a
yeah,
no way to reframe it.
and if you're saying yes every time to like the same event or the same thing or whatever, sometimes you get labeled as like that's your responsibility now basically like
Right? Yeah, so people
Carrie
just give up. Like,
right,
okay,
because Carrie always does that. Carrie's always going to do it and so why would I bother
right,
trying to help or whatever.
right. Or maybe they've tried to help, but because there remember there's an underlying component of control,
Mm,
right? So which means there's an underlying component of perfectionism. And so how many times do we say, well, no one's gonna if I don't do it, no one's gonna do it. It's not gonna get done. Or if it's gonna get done right, it has to be me that does it. Right.
yeah.
Why is it your responsibility to say yes to everything and to have to do everything?
Yeah.
Right. Are you taking on other people's responsibilities when we do it with our kids too? I
Yep.
know because I've done it.
Yep.
you know, like, and we really, as parents, one of our jobs with our kids is to um, help them be independent. And so when we're always doing everything for them, they don't learn those skills, it's another reframe. Like how, is this a skill that I am basically neglecting my child learning?
Yeah, I think that's a great point because I'm sort of experiencing that right now. So my daughter's 8, and it's such an interesting age because you go from toddler and, like, younger child to now she's a little bit older and she can definitely do more stuff, but the transition for me
Mhm.
has been tricky because I'm not used to having her be able to do this stuff, and so it's almost like, again, that autopilot, like, I've always done this for her or with her or whatever, but now I know she can do it, but it's hard to get out of the habit too, and
Yeah,
it's also interesting because she's becoming her own person now, and it's just a really fun time, but it's also, like I said, such a transitional period.
right.
So
Yeah, and it's hard to let go too, because
mm,
also, let's say you're giving her chores to do, right?
yeah,
And you are used to doing the chore, let's say load the dishwasher a certain way. We do this
right.
with our significant others too,
Oh, yes.
right? It's like,
Yes.
you're doing it wrong.
Yep.
And then what do? Throw their hands up like, well, just do it yourself then. And so there's that controlling component that is kind of insidious and sneaky with the people pleasing, because on the outside it looks like we are Wonder Woman, right? Like we can do it all, but the problem is you can't do it all well,
Right. And
because
you know what, Carrie? I'm convinced that sometimes if we're doing a chore all the time and then someone else helps us do it, I feel like they do it, quote unquote, wrong on purpose.
so that we'll say and then
Yes.
forget it.
Yes. Oh
There
my
might be
gosh.
some component of that,
Oh,
but
yep.
I just there was a great and it was a great reminder. And actually this reframe a few years ago was pivotal for improving my relationship with my significant other, and it was Mel Robbins, uh an Instagram post that she did yesterday that I saw, and it was, don't be mad at someone for not acting or behaving, I can't remember the exact wording, the way you want them, or
Mm,
for not being the person you want them to be,
yep.
right? Like we that people pleasing, because in a way where, so like if you're the meal maker or whatever, sometimes, right, we want to them to be eating what we want them to eat.
Yeah. Well, right, because if we're planning the meals, we're kind of going off, like, I know when I do it, I'm like, "Oh, what sounds good to me this week?" And
Hmm.
maybe I get input from somebody else, but my significant other isn't really home that much. I don't get to see them very often, and so I don't get input from them, and so it makes it hard, and we're just expecting them to have the same preferences as us.
Yeah, well then we get offended, right, when they're
Right,
like, I didn't want mayonnaise on this, or I didn't
right.
want, it's like, what do you mean, it's
This is
when
how
you
it's supposed
start,
to be served.
right, when you take a step back and start talking about this out loud, you realize just how silly some of it is, and the way that we think, because if someone was doing that to us, we'd be like, well, I just don't like mayonnaise, or I
Right.
don't want, like, and like, and we wouldn't expect them to get all bent out of shape over,
Right.
you know? So it's just so ridiculous sometimes. So yeah,
Yes.
there's that I really, and even like with the people pleasing, we do it like you said, Ashley, on autopilot. So we don't even really realize that we're doing it. And that's why we're talking about it, because we want you to start noticing. And that's really one of the first things. Just start noticing, like, and ask yourself, be honest with yourself. Am I doing this to control the situation? Because control is quote unquote safe. It keeps us in our comfort zone, because if we're in control of the situation, which we think we are, but when people are in our, that's, who knows what they're doing, but that's where the trust comes in, trusting yourself, trusting the people in your life. But yeah, and like I said, I have had to work on this big time. And it's like you always have to work on it. It's not like, oh, I worked on it, I'm done, I'm good,
Right.
because when you start working on yourself and your habits and your mindset. And when you think, just when you think you have it down, life is going to test you and throw you that curveball to see just how well you really have it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
you can always go deeper.
Right. Yeah, and something else I was just thinking about too, I think it changes based on your season of life too, like we've talked about before,
Absolutely.
because I used to say yes to everything because I had the energy, I had the
Mhm.
capability, I wanted to do it most of the time. Maybe there were a few things and then here's the other piece too, like sometimes we say yes because we are excited about it, and then it comes time to like do it, and you're like, why'd I do this?
Yes.
And so pay attention to those moments too, right? Like,
Yeah, that's a great point. Yes. Because that I've done that so many times. Like I'll say yes out of my people pleasing ways. And then once I start, like you said, like it's almost like you feel like this heaviness, like it's a
yep,
burden. That's another good clue too. That I'm glad you brought that up because that is another great clue that you are people pleasing when all of a when you just maybe not in the first moment when you say yes, but then all of a sudden it's like, ugh, it's just this heaviness. It's like, why did I just say yes to that?
right.
And you start thinking about what you're going to have to do to get this done, whatever it is. And it's just like, ugh, it's just an ick that comes.
Yes, the ick
uh,
factor.
yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh, I just, and then if you, and I have backed out, I'll apologize. Like, I
Right,
just, I thought I'd have time for this and I don't. And
right.
that's another thing, another learned skill too, is sometimes you do have to back out.
Mhm.
Um, and, but
That's
when you,
okay.
right. But when you learn to say no more often, you don't
Yes,
won't have to do the backtrack thing.
right.
So notice when you're doing it. Is this
Yes.
something you've had to work on, Ash?
So, I feel like a little bit, but I think I've just sort of it's been a little bit more natural for me, I think, because I don't I'm a homebody, and I don't really get reached out to from many places, I guess. Maybe it's
Mhm.
a more of a work thing than like school or family thing for me. Um, I think I did have to practice saying no to work things
Yeah.
because every opportunity I saw, I was like, "Oh, that sounds like a good idea." Like
Mhm.
everything. And then I
Yeah.
said, "Wait a second. What are my goals? What am I trying to accomplish? And are these things actually going to help me with this or
Right.
not?" And so then I heard that from somebody else at a conference I attended. And I said, that is a great way to help me decide um, what things I want to pursue. Because when I started my private practice and working from home, instead of working like my clinical 9 to 5, I was able to do anything I wanted, right? And so I have a hard time when I have all of the options in front of me to narrow down which ones I want to do. And so I
Mhm.
think, yes, I've had to work on it from more of a work perspective of like, what things are going to help me do what I want? And I will say yes to those. And what are the things that I might like to do or that sound good, but aren't really going to help me get to where I want to be? And maybe I'll consider those a little bit closer and decide from there what to do. And I think, like we were talking about, instead of being on autopilot and saying yes, taking that step back to really think about it, think about all the work that's involved, think about how it's going to affect you and, in the
Yeah.
long run, and figure out for yourself, put
Mhm.
you in the driver's seat, like we like to say,
Mhm.
um, to decide.
No, those are great points because how many entrepreneurs, like we both are, uh,
Multipreneurs.
multipreneurs, yeah, and through the years, like yes, like I would say because you I know for myself, I'm like, well, I don't dare say no to anything because what if work dries up over here and this or
Right.
that? When you're a multipreneur, you've got all these little buckets. And
Mhm.
so when one starts empty, you can fill another one up. And so it was always kind of that fear, again, it's fear based of um running out of work. So I couldn't say no,
Right.
right? But
Right.
when so any of you listening, if you are an entrepreneur, um, you've got to have your sort of mission statement, right?
Mhm.
Your purpose.
Yeah,
Uh,
and also, like, a little bit of a long-term goal-ish in mind, like, where do you wanna be in 3 to 5 years? Because if you don't know that, then you don't really know where you're going and what will help you to get there.
right. And you can kind of apply it to personal life too. Like we all have a purpose. You don't have to be a business owner to have a purpose. We all have a
Right.
purpose and why we're here. So when you know what your purpose is, you can also start honing down, like think about all the, for instance, charities out there. And if you have a heart for so many different things, but you can't possibly say yes to all of them, right?
Right.
So it's kind of that thing. What's your purpose and what things are you say have been saying yes to that are not fulfilling that purpose?
Yeah. And
And
the more things you say yes to that help you meet your goals or your purpose, I feel like just open the door for more of the same thing. And um I remember a coworker at my clinical job when I was leaving to start private practice said something about, because I was talking to her about a choice I was making or something. And she said something about the universe will give you like what you need when you need it. And I always thought that was kind of like, well, I don't know if I believe in that. But it was so true. Like, it was so interesting to me to think about, like, how that ended up working out, like, I said no to one opportunity, and then something else came along that was a right fit.
yes. Yeah, because you open up the space for it,
Right.
right? So yeah, totally. Whether you believe it's the universe or God or whatever, like when you are more honed in on why you're here and what your mission is, those opportunities come along. But if you're filling your time, you're filling your bucket with things that aren't really supposed to be there,
Right.
you're saying yes because you're afraid to say no.
Yeah.
There's not going to be room for the things that you're supposed to have.
Yeah.
So we like one of our favorite questions: how is it serving you, right?
Mhm.
So when you're saying yes, or you're faced with a decision whether or not to say yes or no, or even maybe, I mean, some maybe can be a response too, or maybe not this time but next time. How is it going to serve you? And also in general, how is people pleasing, how has it been serving you? Because as we've said, um in previous episodes, everything we do is serving us in some way.
Right.
It's keeping us safe. You've survived this far, you're still here, right? So it's served you. um but is it still serving you? How's that going for you? Is it serving you in the way that you
Right.
want it to be serving you?
Yeah. Getting back in that driver's seat.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And reframing, hopefully we've offered a few reframes for you today. um and um serving others, so like we said, serving others, it just feels good. um where people pleasing, you get resentful,
Mhm.
maybe some bitterness, you feel that
Right.
overwhelm like Ashley said. um so what about boundaries, Ashley? Where do those come in?
Yeah, I think once you get a little more clear on what your mission or purpose is or what things you are wanting to include, it will leave you room to be able to say no to
Mm,
other things or decide what boundaries you wanna have. Like, if you wanna be involved in kids' school activities or, parent associations or whatever, eh, go into it knowing how much you want to do. Like, instead of signing up for everything all year, maybe pick out a few events to help with and let them know about that upfront or however the schedule works for them. I think that's one thing to think about. Or like if you're an entrepreneur, figure out um again what aspects of it you're willing to say yes or no to, but also leaving yourself room for the flexibility piece.
yes, yes. Yeah, and I think too that the people pleasing also can come into play when we start changing our habits. Um, I'll just like as an example, let's say you were used to getting together with girlfriends and having a glass of wine or a cocktail or whatever, and you've decided you're going to take a break from drinking. So now you have a choice to make when you get together with these girlfriends, because what I've noticed is that people who if they're still drinking, they get uncomfortable if you're not.
Mm,
Like it's almost like they think you're judging them when in fact it's just a choice that you've made for yourself. So you're going to keep having your cocktail when you're with them to please them. Does that make sense?
right. Yeah.
Like sometimes you changing your habits makes other people uncomfortable.
Right. That's a
uh
whole nother that's
it's
a
a
whole
whole
nother
other, but
episode.
it's also another reason why we might people please
Right. Exactly.
to
And
prevent
setting the
that.
boundaries, like having the conversation ahead of time maybe, or practicing it in your
Yeah,
mind or with somebody else, like role playing, because if you're expecting this conversation to come up and you're prepared for it, it'll go a lot easier and you won't feel pressured into it. I
right.
think that's really helpful. Another boundary type thing I was just thinking about is letting go of that perfectionistic
Mm,
um mindset, because done is better than perfect.
yes.
And so if you're swamped and someone's loading the dishwasher, might be hard, but let them just do it.
Walk away,
Yeah,
walk away.
don't look at it. Like, let them push start and just don't.
But I think too, like sometimes, like in the if we take a step back and look at the big picture and the grand scheme of things, is how the dishwasher is loaded really that big a deal? Right?
Exactly.
Like, is anyone gonna die
No.
because it was loaded incorrectly according to you how you I will so I when I was first married to my first husband, I was doing dishes one night and he came up and he pushes me aside. He says, "Let me show you the correct way to do this."
Oh gosh.
Now, being the people pleaser that I am, I bit my tongue and, but I should have said, "Oh, great, you can do the dishes."
Right.
you know?
Right.
But that's just like one example that of that control, right? That it's got to be done our way or no way.
Yeah.
What's that? My way
And
or the highway,
right.
like
But it
kind
leaves
of.
it open to communication too, because if there is something that needs to be done a certain way for XYZ reason, whatever, or maybe everyone in the house thinks it needs to be done different ways, maybe come together and figure out like, okay, when I do it, it's going to be done this way and that's just how it is. And you can do it also and you can do it your way. Or maybe is there a way we can come up with together that works for everybody? It depends on what it is for sure. So,
Yeah, and also be careful about like if you are saying, okay, go ahead, you're giving more responsibility to other people. Don't go back and quote unquote fix what they did,
right,
right? Like like I said, don't be mad at other people for not being who you want them to be.
right.
Um so that's sort of yeah, those so it's a tug of war,
Yes.
really, the people pleasing and serving others. The
Yeah.
people pleasing comes in sort of a pretty package, but really underneath is not so cool.
Right.
So we challenge you just to start noticing um where you are maybe people pleasing and trying to take control, and ask yourself, is it really my responsibility to take control of this? um am I taking away someone else's opportunity or responsibility or blessing or whatever, um out of my own fear because I feel like I need to control the situation or whatever it is, or perfectionist. Most of us who are perfectionists know that we are, I think.
Yeah.
I
I
have
agree.
had I have had someone once when she's like, my staff tells me I'm a perfectionist and I don't see it. I'm like, okay, let's point out the ways.
Right. Right.
So I think a lot of it is having an honest conversation with yourself to start with.
Yeah.
Um,
As most of our ideas do.
yes, yes. So awesome. Anything else you
Yeah.
want to add, Ashley?
I don't think so.
This was great. Where else
Yes.
can they find us?
So we are on lots of places. We're on Instagram at self-care cafe, all one word, _official. On Facebook at self-care cafe. We also have a free Facebook group. We are on Spotify for podcasting. And we also have a little Buzzsprout podcast website, and most of that stuff is all in the show notes. So there's links right to it. And we have a great little free downloadable too. We have an episode that's gonna talk about that. So yeah, that's where you can
Awesome.
find us.
Yay. And we also have a twice a month,
Oh yes.
like it's kind of like a group coaching. You can
Yep.
just sit in and listen if you want, or you can we can help you in an area. It's pretty cool. So you can, where can they find out about that?
I'll start putting the link in down below. Yep.
Ashley does all this stuff, so
Yep.
um
I'll add that.
she is my angel.
Yes. And if you can't find it or it's not there by the time this airs, you can message us and we can get you
Yeah,
that.
yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, like Carrie said, it's like a no pressure, just come chat. We can coach you through some stuff if you want to. If you want to just listen, that's fine too. You can ask questions about anything,
Yeah,
food, body image,
yeah.
self-care, any
It's
of
a
it.
great way to get to us, like some, it's not quite kind of one-on-one, but you know,
It's a small group. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So this was a great conversation. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Love you,
Yes.
latte.
See you next time. Love you, latte.